Biggest tip for running a fulfilling one-shot, my DM guilty pleasure, and how long have I been DMing? This is a Q&A and a casual hangout, so grab something to drink and let's get cozy. I've got hot chocolate. Welcome to the fireplace. I'm Kelly, and I'm starting to think that the fireplace and the hot chocolate together may have been a bad idea. I'm already starting to sweat. Okay, but let's not mess around. Let's get right into the serious business. Colette Mary 9631 wrote, how long have you been DMing? And that they're running their first one-shot. Congratulations. I hope you have so much fun. Don't be too hard on yourself, just enjoy the experience, and I know that everyone at your table is going to be super stoked that you're running something. Every time someone in our group runs something for the first time, we're always really excited, so I hope you have a ton of fun. I'm still a pretty new DM. I've been DMing for 5 years, and I've been playing for 5 years. I actually DM'd before I'd ever played. Loren, my wife, was a big fan of Jake and Amir, and back in 2018, we were on a road trip, and she said that Jake from Jake and Amir had started this D&D podcast called Not Another D&D Podcast, and that had just come out the previous month, so we listened to the first few episodes on our road trip, and I'd never really heard of D&D outside of pop culture references, so I didn't really know what it was, but as soon as we heard that, I just knew that I absolutely had to play this game, and so when we got back, we messaged some of our friends and got a group together, and no one really had that much D&D experience, so I just offered to DM and run the game, and had no idea what I was doing, and learned on the job. And so yeah, I've been running games for 5 years, almost 6, but I would definitely still consider myself a newer DM for sure. There are so many people that have been running D&D for like 30 years, which is incredible. But yeah, I still love it just as much, and I'm still excited every time we play. I just spend a lot of time thinking about D&D and thinking about DMing. Every session I just try and improve on something, get a little bit better each time. Hopefully my group would say that I have been. Marsara1, also hello again, asks, favorite snack while playing? My group and I all realized very early on that we have the same favorite D&D snack, which is cucumbers and hummus, and also salt and vinegar chips. So weird together, but so delicious, and I think that's probably why we're all friends. But yeah, we are just absolute fiends for cucumbers and hummus. I don't know why. And then for candy, I think I'd probably have to go with like fuzzy peaches or something like that, or mint chocolate. I really like mint chocolate. But fuzzy peaches would be a close second, I think. And second part of the question, do you play just D&D or other TTRPGs as well? I play 95% D&D. I would really like to play more other TTRPGs, but realistically, I don't know, we have 2 campaigns running, and then outside of that, that's kind of all of my TTRPG time, but I do want to play more. I've played the Star Wars RPG, which I really enjoyed, and I bought Skate Wizards, but we haven't actually played it yet, but I do intend to run that hopefully next year. And also we played Alice is Missing, which is, it is a TTRPG. It's kind of closer to a board game almost. It is a TTRPG, but it's somewhere kind of between a board game and a TTRPG. But it was really fun, and we liked that a lot. My goal is definitely to play some more systems in 2024. I would like to play the One Ring system, especially the starter set. That sounds really, really fun. And I just backed a MCDM RPG, so I'm very excited to play test that in 2024. And I'd also like to try some kind of sci-fi RPG. I haven't quite decided on which one yet, but I'd definitely like to run a sci-fi setting for my group and play a sci-fi RPG, so we'll see what happens with that. 95% D&D, but I wish I played more. Ends Web asks, what is your biggest tip for running a fulfilling one-shot or short campaign? For me, one-shots are kind of almost closer to a board game night than a D&D campaign. When I try and run them, I prioritize fun, and they usually trend towards more comedy and silliness, just because there's such a limited amount of time. You're not going to have time to do like character work or big satisfying emotional arcs, so I really just prioritize fun and probably silliness and sort of a more casual experience. I just really want people to come away from a one-shot like they do from a board game night, where it was just a super fun social experience, and the big takeaway wasn't anything about they spent a long time waiting around or anything like that. It was just that they had a lot of fun. So as far as running a fulfilling one-shot, I do everything I can to make sure that it's a fun experience. So I usually try and make the combat super dynamic or come up with an interesting different mechanic that is outside of something that we would usually do, and just have the setting generally be a little bit more casual. TicTacMan17 asks, what are some of your favorite TTRPG story moments? Thought about this one for a while. I think one definitely stands out from my group's first campaign. One of the characters was a paladin with sort of an ocean theme, and the party was trying to get some more information from her god, and I came up with a mechanic that she could basically get in touch with her god in an extreme way in order to gain a lot more information. It would be super high stakes but really high reward. The mechanic I used was essentially party kind of had to drown her and then put her into death saves, and then each death save, she could choose to ask another question of her god, and her god would come to her in that time where she was kind of in between the mortal and afterlife, and her god would come to her and provide answers. So she asked a question, got an answer, but it was a failed death save, so she was sitting at 1 fail. She asked a second question and rolled a nat 1, but they were at a higher level. I can't remember exactly why. Someone in the party had a feat that if anyone in the vicinity rolled a 1, they could re-roll it, and I gave her the out at that point where she could, stop moving forward, but she wouldn't get the answer. But she proceeded and saying that there's no way she was going to roll 2 nat 1s in a row, and obviously she did roll a second nat 1 in a row, and her character straight up died, which led to then we did a whole arc where the party went to this god's domain in the afterlife with a bunch of plane shifting and stuff like that, and ended up essentially breaking her out of the afterlife, and it ended up being a really cool story arc. But it came from a very high stakes, high reward gamble moment in which the gamble did not pay off, but it has been, I think, in our group, definitely one of the most referenced moments from our D&D time. It was just a lot of fun, but really intense. And the second part of this question is, what's your favorite campaign setting / structure been? Do you prefer low or high stakes, comedy or drama, etc.? There's a lot in this question. I think my favorite setting is always just the current one that I'm either running or playing in. I'm always really excited about what our group is doing at the moment, and just being in it really gets me excited. So I don't think that I've had a favorite setting, and I haven't played a ton of the pre-written settings, just some stuff in the Sword Coast, in Waterdeep, and then all up and down the Sword Coast, all over the place. And I'm currently running in the Ethereal Expanse setting, and that's been really fun. But those two are the only my only experience with pre-written settings. But the campaign that I'm playing in, the DM has made their own setting, and it's sort of like a Greek Mediterranean crossed with high fantasy, and it's really cool. I really enjoy the world. We're all wearing togas, and the gods are really involved, and it's just the capital city has very much a Mediterranean vibe, and then there's sort of other cities with different aesthetics, but it's been really cool, and I like that blend of Mediterranean Greek kind of fantasy has been really cool. My favorite campaign structure, I think, is definitely more of a linear structure rather than a sandbox style to play in and to run. I find when I've run, at least for my group, when I've run a more sandbox environment, they don't really know where to go or what to do, so I kind of end up having to kind of move them along a bit more. And I think I like setting up lots of little interesting breadcrumbs and plot lines that are kind of pulling them along a little bit, and that they kind of all intertwine and end up in sort of one major plot, rather than just having a bunch of kind of disparate adventures, which is also a completely valid way to run and play D&D. I just think for me and my group, we like to have sort of a more linear storyline. So that structure has worked well for me. And high stakes for sure. I really like making very difficult encounters. I make most of my encounters pretty deadly. I mean, not just like a town guard encounter or something like that. That's not going to be deadly, but I really do enjoy making very high stakes, very difficult encounters, and then giving my players more opportunity to rest and things like that, instead of a bunch of smaller, low stakes encounters, which I guess would be more similar to the traditional sort of dungeon crawl. But yeah, I'm a big fan of big, epic, high stakes battles, so that's what I go for. And then comedy versus drama, I like a mix of both. I don't like things that are too silly, but I also don't like things that are too serious either. And I'm a big fan of Not Another D&D Podcast, and I know sometimes they go really silly. I like that too, but they also have really poignant emotional moments, and I like that as well. I'm a big fan of their kind of mixture, and I try and emulate that in my own campaigns in some ways. Obviously, we're not professional comedians, so it tends to be a bit more serious than comedy, but I definitely don't like all one or all the other. I like to mix in certainly some heavy drama and emotional moments as well, and I think that's what makes a D&D campaign incredible, is that you can have these super funny highs and hilarious moments followed by like really scary or emotionally sad stuff happening, and the emotions that you feel at the table are all real, which is crazy because you're all just sitting around imagining something. But that's definitely one thing I love about D&D and TTRPGs. All right, hot chocolate break. What is your favorite monster to run in each character tier? 0 to 5, 6 to 10, etc. For low level tiers, I do like goblins just because they're so classic. Mechanically, they're not very interesting, but I like them because, I don't know, it seems like a level 1 game without any goblins just feels kind of weird. So I do like goblins, even though it can get boring for sure. But otherwise, I also like a monster called the Blink Dog, which is a good low-level minion or companion to give one of your monsters or your people that your party's fighting. Their aesthetic is really cool. They're a fey creature, and they teleport around, which is visually really cool and fun to describe, but also it gives them really good battlefield mobility, which allows the fight to be a bit more dynamic. If you have a bunch of these things and they're kind of zipping around, they can draw people away from the fight and just keep things moving a bit. One of the things I'm always fighting with in D&D combat is trying to stop it from just stagnating and everyone just standing in the middle swinging swords at each other. So having monsters that can move without taking opportunity attacks is awesome. So the Blink Dog is really cool for that. For mid-level level 6 to 10 players, there's a whole bunch of monsters called the Lonely, the Lost, the Angry, the Hungry. There's a couple others as well from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I think they're really cool. They're really creepy. They have some interesting abilities, and especially once you start putting them together, some are ranged, some are melee. I like the look of them in the art. They're very weird and creepy, and the mechanics are kind of fun as well. And I think they make a good mid-level fight, as well as the Death Slad. It's a shape changer, so you can have all kinds of fun with that. It can be disguised as different things, and it has cool spells, and it's just a really interesting monster. A lot of monsters just have, a bite attack and a claw attack. They make a multi-attack, and that's kind of it. Their damage varies. But the Death Slad has a lot of kind of like little tricky things, which I like. And then moving up into higher level, kind of above 10, there are so many dragons in Dungeons and Dragons, obviously. But there are a ton of dragons, which is cool, and I didn't really explore a lot of them until fairly recently. All of the dragons have really interesting features, and I think that you could reskin them just because it's a dragon in the mechanics. It doesn't have to be a dragon in your game, and I think I'm going to start doing that more, because a lot of the dragons have really cool breath weapons that are not just fire, all the different colors of dragons, and chromatic dragons, and all kinds of stuff. But you can easily reskin them and make them look like whatever you want, because the mechanics are super cool. So that's not a specific monster, but dragons. And then the other thing are casters, like archdruids and archmages. I think they make such great villains because they are humanoids and they can be messing with the party in different ways. So I really enjoy, typically my higher level villains are casters of some kind. So it's usually an archmage or an archdruid or a reskinned other type of monster. But typically they are humanoid, so they can have conversations with the party and have plots and things like that. But I do like using the Archdruid and the Archmage a lot. The fire looks so nice when it's all really on high, but it's really hot, so I could turn it down, but then it wouldn't look as nice, so I'll leave it up. And then the last level, which I'll kind of call epic level of play, sort of like above CR 15, above CR 15, above level 15. The purple worm, I think, is cool because it just feels epic. Like, it's just a massive, massive monster, and in order to fight it, your players are either flying or leaping through the air and just fighting this literal Titan. I do like using that monster just because it really feels like an epic fight at a high level, which I think is really cool. And then the other one that I've come across, which I really like, is the Nightwalker. Again, a very cool aesthetic, and it has a bunch of different abilities which allow it to, you can do different things each round, which allow it to feel fresh. If you only have a couple of options, after a few rounds, the monsters kind of start to feel stale. It's like, oh, it's another claw attack, another claw attack. But the Nightwalker has a bunch of different things, and also it reduces your hit point maximum, which at a higher level feels really scary. So I like the danger that it brings, because once you get into high level D&D, it's really hard. It's really hard to actually challenge your players and come up with fun and fulfilling and dangerous combats. But the Nightwalker is something that I came across and I do like, because of that hit point maximum reduction feels quite dangerous. Imano08 asks, what do I do in order to implement my characters' backstories into my campaign? And what are other ways to make my players feel more involved and interested in the campaign? And I'm actually doing this right now for the campaign that we just started a little while ago. I'm working with my players to try and pull some more backstory out of them and then implement that and tie it into the campaign in the future. So a well-timed question. I guess my first piece of advice would be to treat the first couple levels as a prologue. Don't necessarily force your players to lock in their backstory or anything. I don't know, maybe your games are different, but I think a lot of my players don't really know their character until they start playing them at the table, and they kind of learn about their character and how their character fits in with the party as they play the first few sessions. So you could either run like a few session zeros, or you can treat the first few levels as just kind of a prologue adventure related to the main campaign, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to start stringing out breadcrumbs right away. Then I just try and find gaps in their backstory. This usually comes in the form of objects that are in their backstory. Maybe they don't know how they got there, what they really are, where they came from, or people in their backstory. This person disappeared, this person suddenly appeared in their life. I just look for things that the character wouldn't know, and then I kind of fill in that gap and plug that into my main story arc. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope it does. And it's very much a back and forth. I'll be messaging with my players. You got this item and you don't know where it came from. Could it have shown up in this way? Yeah, okay, cool. I'll put that in. And then we can kind of go back and forth, and I ask them, I take what they said in their backstory, and then I go, okay, so I think I understand what you're saying here. Could I make this little tweak to it, or add this detail, or maybe you don't know this part of it, and just have that conversation with them to make sure that it's, I'm not just changing their backstory, but I can also work back and forth with them in order to kind of fit it into the campaign a little bit. And part of that sort of back and forth is also, especially with characters from people's backstory, is just talking to them and making sure that I don't change the essence of any characters. So if I want to make a character from someone's backstory potentially be evil or tying into the villain in some way, I'll ask first, this character from your backstory, there's some mystery surrounding them that I'm going to kind of play with. Is this character definitively good? Are they definitively selfish, or do you not care? But sometimes a player puts a character into their backstory and they definitely want them to be good. Like, my character's mom is this kind of person and she's a good person, so don't take any character characters that your players specifically want to be good and make them evil or anything like that. So I always check in before I take any characters from someone's backstory and try and tie them into the campaign. Just check in. You don't have to give them any specifics, but just check in like, okay, this person, maybe they were morally gray. Is that okay? And then it doesn't feel like you're changing your player's backstory without their permission. And the other thing is, if I am going to make something evil from a player's backstory, I try and give them a reason, a motivation for that. It's not like they're just evil for evil's sake. Like they were put in a hard spot and they chose the evil decision, but they were put in a tough situation or they were manipulated into doing this thing. So that helps to make the characters more relatable as well, rather than just like, your mom's a psychopath and she's super evil, so sorry. Where's that? So that might not feel okay to your players. As far as increasing involvement and interest in the campaign, I'd say first is just to make sure that it's a story that your players are interested in following. I've a friend who doesn't like Game of Thrones, doesn't like Lord of the Rings, so I'm not gonna run a medieval European fantasy story for them because they're not interested in that. So I think first and foremost, if you're choosing a pre-written campaign or if you're writing your own, just kind of either gauge or directly ask your players what they're interested in, the types of media that they consume, because if they're not interested in the type of story, then they might check out of the campaign, no matter what of the other steps you follow. And then the other thing, I always try and make fun the number one priority, because it's a game and we're all getting together to have fun. So if anything is not fun, I throw it out. Even if it's gonna impact cool character arc that I had planned later, doesn't matter. If my players aren't having fun and enjoying it, I'll throw it out and I'll rethink it. So that's the other thing for sure for me, is to make fun the number one thing. Lastly, to make their decisions matter. I have found that really drives engagement in the game. If you are putting your characters in positions to make decisions, and then those decisions have really meaningful impacts on the world, they can take ownership over the world as well, and they feel like they are really making a meaningful influence and impact. So I always try and think of my campaigns as basically a decision tree, and I try and put them in situations where there's a decision to make, and I'll kind of loosely think about what would happen in either scenario, and so that I'm not trying to encourage them to make one decision or the other. Truly, both are viable decisions, and whichever decision they make has an impact on the world. That's not happening every session, but I try and make sort of the big plot points in the game like a decision tree. So then I am intentionally presenting them with decisions, and those decisions have meaningful impacts. Say hi to everyone. Hi, this is Junie. Hey, you gonna relax? Okay, bye. Bearcat1868 asked, are there any adventure/supplement ideas that you've had but haven't figured out how to do the logistics for yet? Yes, my next campaign setting that I want to write and run is going to be a heavy time theme. If there's anyone in my group who's watching this video, just earmuffs. Big time theme going on, and my idea is that time will be in strands, and there will be sort of big events in history in which the strands unravel and separate and then come back together for other events. But during these sort of unraveling times, there are alternate realities of which sort of caused the fracturing from these events, all the different decisions. And so these alternate realities will exist, and I thought it would be cool to have the players be able to communicate with themselves in the other reality and therefore be able to exchange information with that character in the other reality and potentially switch subclasses. So during the later stages of a campaign, I find sometimes playing the same subclass can get a little bit boring or stale. So I thought it would be a fun mechanic to try and introduce a way for players to be able to change that up without kind of on the fly, depending on what they're doing. But it may just end up being too much for the players to handle, having basically two characters at a higher level. So I don't know, it could go terribly, but it's definitely something that I've been thinking about experimenting, and I thought it could be a cool idea. That, yeah, essentially you'd have this second character in this other reality. On a long rest, you could swap abilities with them, so you could essentially swap classes or subclasses on a long rest. You could build one character sort of specially for social interactions and things like that if you knew you were going to be doing that on a day, and then one character specifically for combat and things like that. Again, no idea, this could go terribly, but it was a crazy idea that I had, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I want to try it and just see how it goes. Sir Goatee writes, what is your nichest TTRPG guilty pleasure as a DM? As an example, mine is when my players have a well-compositioned party that covers each other's shortcomings. I find that so satisfying. Yeah, for sure. And then they say, and then they go ahead and split the party anyways. So yeah, I feel your pain for sure. That is very satisfying. I think mine would be when I put in a really, really hard scenario that I don't actually have a clear answer for how to solve it. There's been a few times where I've put my players into a scenario, specifically thinking of one where they had to jailbreak an NPC out of this sort of prison island. I had no idea how they were going to do it, and I had put a lot of guards in and all kinds of sort of some magic defenses and all kinds of stuff, and I truly didn't know if they would be able to do it, but we ran the encounter anyways, and they were so creative with their spell use and their planning, and they just planned so hard and they executed it so well. That just made me so excited that they were able to pull that off, even though I had truly no idea how they were going to be able to do it. So watching my players get super, super creative with a plan, that is my DM pleasure. I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure, but it's very pleasing. James Meow 3039 said, I'd like to see you run a game, see what the setup looks like, how you interact with your players, what props and maps you use, etc. I'd love to run a game on a stream at some point. Maybe that'll happen in 2024. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be with my group. Most of them probably don't want to be on the internet, but maybe I can find some people that do. And so yeah, we'll see. I'd love to run a game at some point. I don't use a ton of props in sort of my every session. The props are definitely a special thing. If there's going to be some really important item to the story, then maybe I will do a prop, but yeah, I don't use a ton of props outside of like letters and maps and stuff like that. It's definitely a special thing because then it feels like, oh, this thing is important. Like he just gave me a physical thing. This must be important to the whole campaign level story. It's just way too much work to do that all the time. So it's definitely a reserved special thing. But yeah, I would love to run a game at some point. I have some friends who have a D&D live stream, so maybe we'll do something together in the future. I'm not sure. Jarl Heavy wrote, for a game session, do you prefer to start in the afternoon and end in the evening, or start in the evening and end in the late evening, or more like the morning? I think I'd prefer to start in the afternoon and end in the evening, but oftentimes we do start in the evening and end at like 1 a.m. or something like that. But I think my ideal time would be like early afternoon until evening. That's when I find I have the most energy, so I'd love to play during that time. My group used to do a thing that we called Bruncheons and Dragons, in which on Sundays we went for brunch and then we went and played D&D all day, and it was amazing. It was fantastic. But now, we're all busier and we moved a little bit further away, so we play online most of the time. So Bruncheons and Dragons died, unfortunately, but that was, I think, my ideal time. Go for brunch, get coffee, and then go and play D&D all day and order lunch takeout at some point as well. That was That was very fun. But now I'm running a weekday session online, and I've really been trying to go for shorter sessions. Been running 2-hour sessions, and I stick to that pretty strictly just because, people have work in the morning and got lots of things going on. And with the online sessions as well, I find it's easier to pay attention. Like if you know that, okay, from 7 to 9, we're playing D&D, I only have to pay attention for 2 hours and then I can go and zone out or whatever. But if the longer sessions online, I feel is really hard to keep people's attention. So yeah, ideally afternoon into evening. Indiana 9109 asked, what are the best class/subclasses for new players? What is the best way to teach new players how to play? Honestly, I think any class at level 1 is super easy. Obviously the classic answer is a fighter, but I don't think there's any wrong answers at level 1. I would definitely start at level 1 and play at that level for a little bit. It's just everything is designed for beginners at level 1. Even the magic is easy. Cantrips, you're all good. I think where it starts to get really confusing is into the subclass choices at levels 2 and 3. Once you start to delve into subclasses, there are just so many options that it can be really overwhelming to a new player. If you are advancing, I would probably help your new players out by just choosing a couple subclasses and presenting them as options instead of just kind of putting them out there on their own to wade through the tons and tons of subclasses, especially with all the modules and expansions and everything. There's so many subclasses, but I would just pick a couple and say like, okay, you're this class. I would recommend either this one or this one for a new player, and they can just pick between the two. And I'd probably also go with a half caster if you're going past level 1. Once you start having a full caster, changing out spells and preparing spells, it's not a big deal. I don't think they will be overwhelmed. I think they just underutilize their character, which is fine as well. If it's your first playthrough, then totally fine to just use the same spells all the time and never change your spells and rely on your cantrips. Just you as the DM will have to adjust the encounters, probably make them a little bit easier for people who don't know how to play their characters as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with having magic even as a new player, because magic is so cool that I think it's one of the coolest parts about D&D and many TTRPGs is if you exist in a world where magic is real, why wouldn't you want to be able to use it? That's something that Emily Axford always says, so I definitely agree with that. So yeah, I would definitely just start at level 1, and I don't think there are any wrong choices, but half casters beyond level 1. Oh, and also I would build in sessions for building characters and leveling up characters. Normally that's something that you kind of do on your own in between sessions, but for new players, definitely for building a character, but especially for leveling as well, I would have a session where, you level up your character together, you talk about all the choices, you run through it. I think people are just not going to want to do the research on their own. They're going to find it overwhelming. So I think that building in time in your sessions to level up together would be really valuable. And then, just have a light encounter for the other part of the session so you still get to play a bit. A Revenant Crow asked, what are some fun craft ideas that you made off screen or even before this channel? Really, I didn't make a ton of crafts before the channel. Just the health potion stand, which is in my normal set, and some custom item cards that I made for my players. I made them custom magic items when they got to higher levels, so I made them cards for that. And then just stuff like aged paper with coffee and letters and maps and things like that. I had lots of ideas, but I didn't actually have the time to do them before the channel. But now the fact that I can use them in my D&D game and make a YouTube video about it, it's like makes putting in the time so much more worth it. So yeah, not a ton of props before the channel, but my friend bought the Waterdeep box set a few years ago and ran a few sessions for us, and getting all the trinkets and props from that really inspired me to do more of that in my campaigns, because it was just so much fun. It was just so cool to receive little pins and coins from the factions that you joined. I really liked that a lot. But then we moved pretty shortly after that, so now we mostly play online, which is another factor in the reduced prop usage. I still, again, do letters and maps and things online, but not really more than that. I think you could do cool online props, but I just haven't quite figured out how yet. So I'm still thinking on that, but if I think of anything, I will let you know. And quite a few years ago, while we were still playing in person a lot, I had this idea that I wanted to integrate LED health bars into my D&D table, and I never quite got the project off the ground before we moved to a lot more online play, but I may or may not be working on something similar that you can use at any table, so stay tuned for that next year. All right, Nathaniel5047 writes, do you like cheese? If so, what is your favorite cheese? I'm vegan now, but when I did eat cheese, I think it'd have to be like a real stanky blue cheese. I don't know, I just really like the tang of, I guess, the mold. God, it's so gross, but it's so good. I like it so much. Just a little quantity though, but just like a little blue cheese on a cracker from a charcuterie board. Oh, yeah, or brie. I could definitely eat a whole wheel of brie, and I did. All right, old British lady said, if you could ensure one bit of advice got added to the 2024 DM's guide, what would it be? I haven't read the DM's guide cover to cover, so this might already be in there, but if it's not, I would love them to add this in. And it's that visuals don't have to be connected to mechanics. Like I mentioned before with the dragons, I do this all the time and I haven't seen any bad consequences. I don't know, I'm sure someone can correct me, but you can reskin and turn anything into something else as long as you don't affect the mechanics, and there really won't be any impact to the game. If someone wants to use a gun in your game, I mean, I know they have gunslinger rules, but you could just have them use bow and arrow stats, like short bow or long bow stats. Long bow for a rifle, short bow for a sort of pistol thing. Doesn't really matter as long as the class can use that weapon and the damage is the same, the mechanics are all the same. It can look like whatever you want it to look like, and that was a pretty big realization for me early on, because I had my players asking, well, can I this is with the theme of my character, I really want the weapon to do this, and then I'm looking at the mechanics going, well, it says it's a great sword, so I don't know, you can't really have a scimitar that looks like a great sword or something like that. It really doesn't matter. The mechanics and the visuals can be separate. If you're not affecting the mechanics, it doesn't really affect the balance of the game, so it doesn't matter. So I am very super easygoing as far as my players wanting to change the look of something to fit the look of their character. They want to have a laser sword that just acts like a great sword, fine, I don't care. Whatever you want. Same with monsters. I found that really liberating when I realized that I could take anything and fit it pretty much into any world by just keeping the mechanics the same, and it wouldn't have any negative consequences. So I would love to see that in there if it isn't already. Zosh Does Stuff asked, how much prep is too much? I've been prepping a campaign for years now. When do I stop and wait for player character backstories? This is a really personal choice. That feels like a long time to me, but I know some people really like to prep a lot and some people barely prep at all. I found that the longer I've DM'd, the less prep I've done and the more kind of different prep I've done, I guess. And that's because once my players get in there and they start messing stuff around and playing with the world, I inevitably change stuff based on what they're interested in. So I would caution against prepping too much for too long, because then you might become too attached to things and your players might not like it or engage with it or care about it, and then if you put all this time and work into it, that might make you really upset. So you might build out this massive world and there's so much detail in there, but your players really only explore this and they're kind of interested in going off in this direction and following this thing. You might get sad that you put in all this work and your players are never going to see it. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for how much you need to prep. It's really that you should just prep until you feel comfortable, and that'll change over time as you DM more, I think. Yeah, I would be cautious about prepping too much, because that might make you less flexible, and it's really important that your players get to shape the world as well, and that comes from being flexible and not being too attached to certain things. I hope it goes well, and I hope you get to run your campaign soon. And now we're gonna do a segment called Nobody Asked, but I'm gonna tell you anyways. This is the end of the questions, but I just wanted to do a little roundup of things that I liked this past year, things that happened, just a 2023 roundup, things I consumed in case you're interested, and things I'm looking forward to in 2024. Obviously, at the beginning of the year was the whole OGL fiasco, and I'm not really going to go into that, but what was a highlight for me is that that the SRD went into Creative Commons for 5th edition. That, I think, was just the best possible outcome from a truly terrible situation, and so I'm really glad it ended up like that, because it means that I don't have to play the next edition of D&D. I can just play 5e forever, and that's awesome, because it's the first TTRPG that I really got into, and overall, been pretty happy with it. It feels pretty flexible. We can do a lot with it. Again, I'm really excited to play more TTRPGs, but it's nice to know that I can just keep playing 5th edition, and people are probably still going to keep making stuff for 5th edition too. So yeah, very glad that the SRD went into the Creative Commons. That was a great result. The next thing was that the 5th edition One Ring module, the Lord of the Rings 5th edition module came out, which led me to learn about the One Ring TTRPG. I didn't know that was a thing, and I'm really excited to play it. I want to get my hands on the starter set. I love Hobbits and Lord of the Rings, obviously, but I'm really excited to play the starter set and the Hobbit adventure and learn more about the Shire, and I don't think we'll play the 5th edition module. I watched Bob Worldbuilder's video on it, and he seemed to think that the actual One Ring TTRPG was a much better implementation, and I'll take his word for it. So we are going to play the One Ring TTRPG and the starter set, which I'm really looking forward to. And the next thing later in the year was that the Ethereal Expanse setting guide Kickstarter happened. They were the first sponsor on this channel, Ghostfire Gaming, and that was how I found out about it. I didn't know that the Ethereal Expanse Kickstarter was happening, but once I did find out about it, I was super excited and I backed it right away. So I'm really looking forward to playing that next year. I'm already playing the setting by playing the Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse PDF adventure that they have on their website that was the inspiration for the setting guide. So anyways, we're already playing the setting, but I'm excited to get the setting guide next year and expand this campaign even more. And then this is not TTRPG related, but I also really like board games, and so I don't know if anyone here is interested in board games, but last year in 2022, I backed a board game called Dead Reckoning, and it arrived in fall 2023, and so we've been playing that a bunch, and it's really fun. If you like board games and you like pirates, I would absolutely recommend it. It's awesome. I've had a ton of fun with it. And then obviously Baldur's Gate came out. That was big news for the people who play video games and people who like D&D. I have been very, very, very slowly working my way through it. I don't even think I'm not even close to through the first act yet. I just don't have a ton of time for video games anymore, but I would like to put more time into it. So hopefully in the new year, I'll be putting more time into that and actually get through it, but I've been really enjoying it so far. And then the newest thing here was the MCDM RPG funded. Matt Colville's RPG is going to be coming out in 2025, but I've backed it and I'm really excited. I'm really intrigued by it. I think it sounds awesome. I'll be looking forward to doing the playtest. I think they're going to release a playtest for backers in 2024. I think that's the idea. I think I've already talked to a couple people in my group about it, and we're really excited to check it out. And I'm actually going to implement their initiative idea into my current 5e campaign, and I'll see how that goes. If it goes well, I might make a whole video on it, but their initiative is basically the two sides roll initiative, and then one person from one team goes, and then the person from the other team goes, and then it's staggered, but you can change and choose who wants to go next. Your players can talk about it and decide who wants to go next, and they can make strategies. And their reasoning for this was that it drives player engagement. You're not just like, okay, I rolled my initiative, I know I go late in the initiative, so I'm just going to check out for the round. And then, oh, it's my turn, and oh, what's going on? I wasn't paying attention the whole time. This is like you're talking with the party, your players have to decide who's going next, they're going to maybe combo off each other. And I don't see why it couldn't work in 5th edition. None of my players have optimized for initiative, so it's not nerfing anyone. You know, if someone in your party has optimized their character for initiative, then it's not really fair to take away initiative from them, but no one in my game has done that, so I'm gonna try it and see how it goes. And then D&D media that I consumed, again, big fan of Not Another D&D podcast, and keep listening to that. We got to go see them in New York, and that was really fun. I also started listening to the Worlds Beyond Number podcast. They're all great. It's really good so far. I didn't get that far, but really enjoyed what I have listened to. And then Loretta and I are still working through Never After on Dimension 20. It's taking us a very long time. We started when it came out, and we've just been slowly working our way through it, but we're really enjoying it, and we've watched most D20 seasons, but we're a bit behind at this point, but hopefully we'll get caught up next year. But thank you so much for all your questions and for hanging out with me. I hope you have a great holiday and new year, and I'm really excited for 2024 and to make a bunch more videos. So yeah, thank you, and I appreciate you.